my earnings from Wimbledon, with my earnings in general. I invest in my future. So I save a lot of money. I like to.
One player left Wimbledon carrying nothing but a suitcase and plans for a beach vacation.
Where I could just completely lose it.
Another left with an entire country waiting to welcome her home. Within days of the tournament ending, the world's top-ranked player was relaxing under the Mediterranean sun, telling reporters she wanted to forget tennis for a while. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, a 21-year-old rising star stepped through the gates of the Philippine Presidential Palace to receive one of the nation's highest sporting recognitions. Both women had just competed in the same Grand Slam. Both earned prize money. Both made headlines. Yet the stories they took home couldn't have been more different. And that's exactly why this isn't just another Wimbledon recap. It's the story of how one unforgettable week changed the trajectory of a young athlete's career and transformed her from a promising tennis player into a symbol of national pride. Stay with me until the end, because the biggest moment wasn't the upset victory that shocked the tennis world. It happened after the tournament had already ended. Coming into Wimbledon, expectations surrounding Alexandra Eala were growing faster than ever. She had already shown flashes of brilliance throughout the season. Every tournament added another piece to the puzzle, convincing more fans that she belonged among the sport's elite. But proving potential and delivering results on one of tennis's biggest stages are two very different challenges. Wimbledon has humbled countless talented players. Its fast grass courts reward confidence, punish hesitation, and expose every weakness. For someone only 21 years old, the spotlight alone can become overwhelming. Across the net stood experienced professionals who had already built their reputations. Many analysts expected Eala to compete well, maybe steal a few sets, but very few believed she would become one of the tournament's biggest stories. That doubt wouldn't last long. Her opening match immediately showed that she had arrived prepared. Instead of easing into the tournament nervously, she dictated rallies from the very first games. Her movement looked sharp, her decision-making remained calm, and every important point seemed to strengthen her confidence. There was no unnecessary drama, no marathon battle, just disciplined tennis that quietly announced she belonged in the second round. Sometimes the most dangerous players aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones who win efficiently while everyone else is watching bigger names. That's exactly what Alexandra Eala did. The victory may not have dominated international headlines, but inside her team there was growing belief that something special might be developing. The second round presented a completely different challenge. This time, things didn't begin according to plan. Her opponent struck first, taking the opening set and putting Eala under real pressure for the first time in the tournament. Moments like these often decide careers. Young players either panic or they discover another level. Instead of forcing risky shots, Eala stayed patient. Point after point, she began extending rallies. She adjusted her tactics. She trusted her movement. Gradually, the momentum shifted. What had looked like complete control from her opponent suddenly became frustration. Games started slipping away. Confidence changed sides of the court. By the end of the match, the comeback wasn't simply impressive, it announced something much bigger. She had become the first Filipino player in the Open era to win a Wimbledon main draw match, creating a piece of history that stretched far beyond personal success. It wasn't just another statistic. It represented decades of waiting for a breakthrough that many tennis fans in the Philippines had dreamed about. Across social media, celebrations exploded. News outlets rushed to update their coverage. Former athletes offered congratulations, and suddenly, people who had never watched one of her matches before wanted to know everything about Alexandra Eala. Then came the match almost nobody predicted. Standing across the net was one of the tournament favorites, a player expected by many to challenge for another Wimbledon title. On paper, the matchup looked heavily one-sided. Experience, ranking, championship pedigree, every measurable advantage belonged to the other side. But tennis isn't played on paper. From the opening games, Eala refused to be intimidated. Instead of playing cautiously against a higher-ranked opponent, she attacked opportunities with remarkable maturity. Her variety constantly disrupted rhythm. She mixed pace brilliantly. She defended when necessary, then instantly turned defense into attack. Every service game became a battle. Every rally increased the pressure. The first set reached a tense tiebreak where 1 or 2 points could decide everything. Those are the moments that reveal character, and Eala never blinked. Winning the tiebreak changed the entire atmosphere inside the stadium. Suddenly, the favorite looked uncertain. The underdog looked fearless. What followed surprised almost everyone watching. Rather than allowing her opponent back into the contest, Eala elevated her level even further. She controlled the tempo. She forced uncomfortable decisions. She played with confidence far beyond her years. When the final point ended the match, Wimbledon had its newest headline. One of the tournament favorites had been eliminated, and Alexandra Eala had officially become one of the biggest stories in world tennis. Victories like this aren't remembered simply because of rankings. They're remembered because they change perception. 1 week earlier, many people still viewed Eala as a talented prospect with exciting potential. Now, commentators were discussing her alongside established stars. International media began analyzing her tactical intelligence instead of asking whether she belonged. Fans from countries that had barely followed Philippine tennis suddenly recognized her name. Perhaps most importantly, young Filipino athletes watching from home saw something different. For years, reaching the highest levels of professional tennis had felt almost impossible. Now, someone from their own country had proven otherwise on the sport's most famous grass courts. But as remarkable as that victory was, the biggest chapter of this story hadn't happened yet. Because after Wimbledon ended, Alexandra Eala wasn't heading toward a luxury resort or a quiet vacation. She was about to receive an invitation that very few athletes ever experience, one that would elevate her achievements far beyond the tennis court itself. When Alexandra Eala boarded her flight home, she wasn't returning as just another professional athlete. She was returning as a national inspiration. Only days earlier, millions had watched her compete on the grass courts of Wimbledon. Now, those same achievements were being recognized at the highest level of government. The setting couldn't have been more different. 1 week, she was battling the world's best tennis players. The next, she was walking through the historic halls of Malacanang Palace. It was a moment that symbolized far more than a successful tournament. It represented what happens when years of discipline finally meet opportunity. During the official ceremony, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. presented Alexandra Eala with a Presidential Citation in recognition of her remarkable Wimbledon campaign. Standing beside her family, Eala accepted the honor with the same calm composure she had displayed throughout the tournament. The ceremony wasn't organized because she had won Wimbledon. She hadn't lifted the trophy. Instead, the recognition reflected something many people felt had become even more meaningful. She had shown the world that a Filipino athlete could compete fearlessly against the very best on one of tennis's biggest stages. That message reached far beyond sports. It became a source of national pride. For countless young athletes across the Philippines, the ceremony sent a simple but powerful signal. Dreams that once seemed impossible were now becoming reality. From the outside, it may have looked like Alexandra Eala suddenly appeared among tennis's biggest names, but anyone who had followed her journey knew the truth. This breakthrough had been years in the making. Long before the international headlines, long before Wimbledon, long before millions of people learned her name, there were endless practice sessions, months spent traveling, sacrifices made by both Alexandra and her family, pressure, setbacks, and countless hours that never appeared on television. Professional tennis demands much more than talent. It requires consistency, patience, and the willingness to improve every single day. That's exactly what Eala had been doing behind the scenes. By the time Wimbledon arrived, she wasn't hoping for a miracle. She was prepared for the opportunity. Along with the recognition came another milestone that quietly attracted attention throughout the tennis world. Her career prize money total crossed the $1 million mark. For many players, that figure represents years of competing at the highest level. For Alexandra Eala, reaching that milestone at just 21 years old highlighted how rapidly her career was progressing. Of course, prize money alone doesn't define greatness. Professional athletes also invest heavily in coaches, travel, fitness, medical support, and tournament expenses. Still, crossing that financial milestone served as another reminder that her performances were producing tangible results. Every victory was opening new doors. Every tournament was creating new opportunity. And perhaps most importantly, sponsors, tournament organizers, and fans were beginning to view her differently. She was no longer simply a promising young player. She had become a legitimate contender on the WTA Tour. One impressive tournament can attract attention. Consistent performances earn respect. Following Wimbledon, international media praised Eala not only for defeating elite opponents, but also for the maturity she displayed throughout the event. Analysts pointed to her tactical awareness, her ability to remain composed under pressure, her willingness to adapt during difficult matches. Those qualities cannot be measured by rankings alone. They're often what separate good players from future champions. Perhaps the greatest compliment wasn't found in statistics. It came from the growing belief that Alexandra Eala belonged on the biggest stages and that her Wimbledon run wasn't a lucky week. It was the beginning of something much larger. Tennis never stops. There isn't much time to celebrate because another tournament is always waiting. After Wimbledon, attention quickly shifted toward the North American hardcourt season. The surfaces would change, conditions would change, opponents would change, but expectations had changed too. Every future match would now carry additional pressure. Opponents would prepare differently, fans would expect deep tournament runs, media coverage would become more intense. That's the price of success. Once you prove you belong, nobody overlooks you again. For Alexandra Eala, the challenge was no longer surprising people. The challenge was proving that Wimbledon wasn't the peak of her story, it was only the beginning. Looking back, what made this chapter so fascinating wasn't simply the tennis, it was the contrast. Some players left Wimbledon focused on rest, recovery, and vacation. Alexandra Eala returned home to represent an entire nation. Some headlines centered around holidays and social media posts. Others focused on history, national recognition, and a young athlete inspiring millions. Neither approach is right or wrong. Every player chooses their own path after a demanding Grand Slam. But the difference in public perception was impossible to ignore. One story faded after a few vacation photos. The other continued long after the final point had been played. At just 21 years old, Alexandra Eala has already achieved milestones many athletes spend an entire career chasing. Historic victory, international recognition, a career earnings milestone, and the honor of being celebrated by her own country after one unforgettable Wimbledon. Yet, perhaps the most exciting part is that none of these achievements guarantee what comes next. Every tournament presents a new challenge. Every opponent brings a new test. Every season writes another chapter. Whether she continues climbing the rankings, wins future titles, or creates even more history, one thing is already certain. Her name is no longer mentioned only when discussing the future of Philippine tennis. It has become part of the conversation about the future of women's tennis itself. And that's a remarkable transformation in such a short period of time. Now it's your turn. Do you believe Alexandra Eala can build on this momentum and challenge for a Grand Slam title in the coming years? Or do you think her biggest breakthrough is still ahead? Share your prediction in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and want more in-depth tennis documentaries covering the biggest moments, rising stars, and untold stories from the tour, don't forget to subscribe. Because if Wimbledon proved anything, it's that Alexandra Eala's story is only just beginning.